Bienvenue, Rich. Welcome to the podcast, and thanks for joining us. How are you?
Very good, thank you. And yourself?
No, I'm doing pretty well, and I mean, like for all of you that are, joining us today, we're here with Rintch. He's quite a fella, like doing a lot of cool things within the basketball side in Norway. Very interesting story. And if you're interested in learning more about stories like Rintch's and want to hear from key sport professionals, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Give this video a like, and maybe make a comment on who you would like to see on the podcast in the near future, and we'll check that out. So Rintch, thanks again for joining us. And I mean, we're just gonna dive right into it, and just tell us a bit about your journey with basketball, how did it all begin? Where does this love for basketball come from?
It started with the dream team. Have you ever heard of the dream team of Barcelona? The Olympic teams of the USA Olympic team that came in '92.
Right.
With Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, Larry Bird,
right.
And all these Hall of Famers. That's where it started. That's where most kids of my generation started to play basketball, at least got the great interest.
Yeah.
And basically that's where my journey began. I went and registered to the closest club back in Brussels.
Right.
And I had a great coach who had a really great passion about it. Guy van der Velde, he will recognize himself.
Right.
And from there, I had pretty quick improvement, going from a small local club to the biggest club in the capital. Was among the best player of the region at the time.
Nice.
And moving on, going outside of Belgium, playing college basketball in the US, Maryland, which was my ultimate goal, to be able to play college basketball, get a degree, and eventually come back to Europe and play pro. So from there in the US, I went to Scandinavia, to Denmark, to a little bit in Sweden, and now here in Norway.
There we go. Well, what a journey. I mean, we got to touch a little bit upon your story in the US too, though. Just how was it to kind of experience the life of college basketball in the US? I mean, it's kind of unique, I guess, in a sense.
Yeah. For me, it was more than just playing basketball. I mean, that's where I became a man.
Right.
To face life the way it is, and all the values that we learn with basketball, that's what I have used in life as well. And this is why also I felt very, very early that I would like to give back everything that I learned.
No, I think that's really great. And I mean, I guess that leads up sort of to the question of how the basketball academy came into life, because obviously you were playing in Sweden and coming to Norway, and where did sort of this idea of the academy come from, and what were sort of the top?
I tell you what, back in Brussels, I was part of the program of what the University of Brussels was doing, but I was still in high school,
right?
And I was attending this program.
Yep.
And so we had great trainings, like individual training, small group trainings, and that gave me the inspiration very, very early, not knowing that I would do it.
Sure.
But one thing though is that when I graduated from high school, then I told my the school principal, that when I come back after my career, I will create an academy. So there you go. Yes, 20 years plus later, then now we're about to do, because we're going to open in Belgium as well, by the way.
Nice. No, that's awesome. Have you talked to him though after about it?
Well, I mean, I'm sure he probably have seen me. I'm sure that there has been teacher that have been checking on me, but when the time comes, I will give him a heads up. That's for sure.
That's gonna be amazing. I'm sure he's gonna be, super proud of you and your accomplishments. And I mean, like as you said too, it's about like giving back, right? And sort of like, contributing the lessons that you learn from like, essentially going across the world, playing basketball, being part of like these kind of like, I guess academy and cultures of like development, not only from like, I guess like a technical aspect, but also from a personal development, which I think is, extremely important. And I guess like something we will touch upon, very soon in this podcast too. But your journey with the Rintch Basketball Academy in Norway sort of like, started back in 2011, and what sort of like was the need you discovered, and how are you essentially like, what was this need you discovered in Norway, and how are you sort of like impacting, I guess, like the basketball side of things here from your side?
When I arrived in Norway, like as you probably know, it was very cold that year. It was minus 28. and I was thinking that okay, after that contract, I'm going south because I'm not
right going to too cold.
Exactly, but things kind of like moved on and on a personal level, and then looking at my environment, I felt that okay, maybe there is room to do something,
right?
Take initiative and do something rather than waiting for somebody to give you the opportunity to do so. Yeah. Why not creating it?
Right.
And basically all the background that I have received, I mentioned Belgium earlier,
yep.
But I started to coach in the US when I was in college.
Right.
And, in youth development. So all that experience, I felt that, okay, but why not try something? So I invested my time, I invested my money.
Right.
And I had a very positive response, like immediately. It didn't take time. It clicked immediately, and I was able to at least at the first beginning share my passion, my knowledge.
Yeah.
And very quick, I was also I got some help from my friends internationally who came to help me out, and we built this program.
That's awesome. And I think like you touched upon something really important here that is already a great learning lesson for a lot of the young people that are listening. And that's sort of like, the opportunity doesn't always stand there, right? So it's essentially about, okay, what can I do? Like, what can I create out of the facilities and environment that I'm in, and just taking that initiative. Because I think a lot of people, it's just like, oh, I'm waiting for that job to come knocking on my door, or like I'm waiting on that person to come calling me or whatever that might be. No one is waiting for you. People, you got to take that initiative. And I think that's a key lesson, that you're like literally just saying, okay, instead of me waiting, what can I do right now? Even if it's going to be like, maybe a short lesson or a good, learning experience, you never know where it's going to take you. And I was sort of like thinking the same too when I was starting Sporting Global. I was like, I don't know how it's going to go, but at least I'm going to learn a lot on it, and I'm going to meet a lot of people. I'm going to, see where things can go. And I mean, like, we're still here. So, you never know where things is going to take you. So I think that's a key learning lesson there.
One particular aspect when I started, I saw a long-term vision.
Right.
So how could I, at least at the time when I was alone starting it, how could I develop a small kid?
Yeah.
So that eventually at the teenage time or even at the adult time,
right,
we can see the progression. That's right. Kind of what was in my mind. So it was not like a one-time shot and then it's over.
Right.
You do one activity and then maybe you don't do it again. I never thought it like that. I always thought that we start and then we develop and we take it a little bit further and further.
Right. And I think that's important though from an academy standpoint, right? Because I mean, like, your main job is, developing players in a sense of like improving them, in several different ways. And you need that long-term, ability to essentially have that impact. And like, what are some of the key fundamentals that you are teaching at the academy? Like, what are some of the key pillars? And I'm thinking both, like, technically, of course, but also, like, maybe mentally. You talk a little bit about the the values, the cultures that you have experienced, and that I guess you were bringing with you to the academy.
Absolutely, but the values of life, just arriving, getting prepared before you get on the floor.
Right.
The routine that you need to have before you get started.
Yeah.
The all the different techniques that will enable you to actually feel comfortable. So you sort of create your own comfort zone, but eventually, right, every time you come back, you're taking a little bit further.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is something that you do alone. You see, so this is how personally I envision basketball development. The fundamentals. What can a player do with its own his or her own capacity,
right,
and take it to the next level,
right?
Yeah.
And talking a little bit about, like, what sort of, like, I guess, offerings of how essentially, like, is this academy running? Like, is it one-on-one session? Is it like group session? Like, what is like the variety of options you guys are doing on teaching these?
So we have the individual training. We have the dual training, so with 2.
Right.
The small groups with 4.
Yep.
We have basketball camps.
Right.
We have activities after school, and we have also we have a team that a traveling team.
Sure.
And also a consulting program where we sort of we're opening doors to players who wish to go to the next step, playing abroad, whether it's professionally or college basketball or some things similar experience.
But yeah, I think it's having that variety, but like, obviously in the current situation, right, with pandemic, I guess it's put down some limitations for you, and of course, like, following the regulations. Like, what kind of, like, challenges have you had to overcome, I guess, with the pandemic, now, I guess, like, from last year and all the way to now, and what are some of the steps that you guys are taking to sort of, like, keep, I guess, like, keep the momentum going of the academy? Because I think there are still a lot of opportunities and potential for doing things.
Yes, on the prime time, I'm talking about Norway. On the prime time, we ran our activities on a limited numbers, which we could do according to the rules.
Yep.
Until the facility could not be open.
Yeah.
So that has happened recently, and from there we then had to concentrate on how can we elaborate a program so that when we reopen, we are ready.
Yep. Yeah.
Not only on the local level where we have been working, but nationwide.
Yeah.
So that is some work to in fact plan. Now we have the time, in a way.
Right.
The downside is that we cannot be active on the court.
Yeah.
But we can be active on the preparation on what can be done in the near future.
Right.
Nationwide and internationally.
Right. And I mean, like, just bringing back to, like, what you said about preparations, right? Of, like, even, like, from, like, how do you prepare players? I mean, like, you kind of, like, just have to do the same now, with your
absolutely. There's no secret. It's simple. I mean, to my conception and the way I have been brought up to this game.
Right.
It's like going for an exam.
Right.
The chances that you're going to do great at your exams if you are prepared.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. The only, I guess, difference is that it's pleasurable, but.
Right. I mean, like
That's how we do it.
can be pleasurable too. but that's another story. Anyways,
Absolutely.
so obviously, you mentioned a little bit on sort of like, increasing your foothold both nationally and internationally, and utilizing the time now to sort of like build that, I guess, foundation again. And obviously with that, it's important to kind of like, build a team, the right kind of players involved, as maybe coaches or market it or what that might be. And what kind of people are you seeking essentially to help you in this journey? And again, what kind of skills and values do they need to possess, from your side?
The skills and the skills can be broad. The values, of course, are the values that I share. That means the care that we can give to people first, before even thinking about the athletes.
Yeah.
Of course, how much passion they have and how much they are willing to dedicate.
Yeah.
Preferably on the long term.
Right.
It can be an experience, of course. It can be students who are willing to have a short-term experience, but a valuable experience, and move on.
Right.
Preferably, I would say people who would like to go and seek an opportunity, not for the time being, but for themselves.
Right.
So the idea of having associates who are also going to own their own work.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like having essentially taking the responsibility and
exactly.
And utilizing this time, not only as maybe as an entryway, but like how can you learn from it? And again, creating value for not only yourself, but for the organization, in a sense of like,
absolutely,
where can this take us? And I think, having people there with you that share those similar values, I guess, as the company as well. I mean, like, I think it's critical, especially for like you guys within the academy, right? Where you talk a lot about the values of the players and the fundamentals, right? Of like how we want, one thing is like, how do we coach the players that we are, having part of the academy and what we're teaching them. And I mean, like, it's essentially, or very essential, I would say, that the coaches and the staff, right, that represents the academy have those values, because absolutely, it's sort of like aligns with like the entire value chain,
Absolutely. And we, the global value, to think that it's not about just what you do where you are.
Right.
You could be doing this in a complete different setting.
Yeah.
With the same, but this is where we separate ourselves from anything that already exists.
Right.
It takes more time. It takes more people who are dedicated, but that's where the beauty is coming, to me at least.
Yeah, and I mean, like, that's what is important. You got to follow your vision. And I think also, like, the reason why we touch a lot upon the values thing is that a lot of the younger generation too, like, they want to be associated with people and organizations that, think similar as them, or like, feel, I guess, like the same kind of aspects of them. And I mean, I guess when you're young too, it's sort of like hard, maybe like, what do I stand for, and like, what is important for me? And I wanted to encourage all of you that are, listening here today as well, of like, maybe use like, 10 minutes after this podcast to just think a little bit about, what do I stand for? What kind of values are important to me? And what do I essentially want to achieve? What is important for me in life? And with that, I think it's going to help you, guide you, as it's done for Rintch, with like his basketball journey, building the academy and building the foundation of what the academy is all about. Because if you have a solid foundation, it's a lot easier to also like understanding how are you going to reach your final destination. And I think that's
we have former player who actually wrote their thesis on what you're talking, like in their master degree. They wrote their thesis on that.
So well, share it with me. I think
I will share it with you. I posted some on social media. I will repost it.
Nice.
And in fact, one of them will be, in fact, opening the branch in Belgium.
Nice.
So we agreed on that. So now
That's
I
awesome.
announce it here in this podcast. But it gives you to sort of confirm what you just explained.
Right.
That's where we are.
That's
And
awesome.
and at the time the boy was 14 years old.
Oh,
So nearly 8 years later, he was presenting his thesis for his master degree based on the idea of creating a basketball academy on everything that that we just talked about.
I don't like that just proves the point of like, putting down the time there and following that, I guess, journey, into what that might lead to and putting down the preparations as we've been touching upon so many times. But I mean, like, I'm thinking also like from, we've been talking a lot of preparation, we've been talking a lot about values, but what other tips do you have for sort of like, looking besides that? What sort of like tips do you have for sports students, maybe interested to work with basketball or maybe like on the academy side of thing, and, where and sort of like how should they begin their journey? Because I guess like it's maybe not as easy to kind of like go the academy route when you're sort of like, fresh out of school, maybe you just have passion for basketball, kind of like, bringing back to like your story of like, where basketball began, but you want to be involved. Like from your side, like how do you start that journey?
Well, I'll take my example.
Great.
When I was in the United States, I volunteered for some organization first, some youth, grassroots youth organizations.
Right.
So, and I could then sort of tailor what I could do. I could see what was working, what was not working, and get some experience from there. And then very fast, people pick up your personality. You very quickly choose. It didn't take very much time. When I graduated from college, the athletic director at Montgomery College asked me to be the assistant coach for the women's team.
Yep. Nice.
But it's just an example to tell you that there is a way to sort of get your way in.
Yep.
My suggestion is try maybe some volunteer. Learn by yourself. Learn by doing.
Yeah.
Sell your personality.
Yep.
Because at the end, that's what it is. Sell your personality. Make contacts. Don't be afraid to make contacts.
Right.
Because they can be very valuable. And that at least that's the minimum that I can say here in this podcast.
No, I think it's a really great advice, and I mean, like, if you're living in Norway, like, just explore, like, where's, I mean, like in this case, of course, like with us being based in Norway, like if you're in Norway or if there's another country, of course, that you're based in, and just just do like a search, right, of like any basketball clubs in the area or like that, and reach out to them and say, hey, I mean, like, I'm really passionate about working in basketball. Like, is there any way I can volunteer, helping out? Like, maybe like, and be a little bit proactive, like, oh, maybe with like some coaching, maybe like following like the assistant coach, if that's something that you're interested in, or maybe there's a different side of, I guess like the basketball side you want to be part of, then, try to like learn from the people that are working in there. So I think it's a great advice. And I mean, like, we have to just come back to the whole point of like, you got to take the initiative. Like that, I think it's just the best way to end this. With like the initiative has to come from you. And if you do, and as you said, showcase your personality, and that you're passionate about this, you can achieve a lot. Rintch is a perfect example of like hard work, personality, and dedication, and having a even like coming. I mean, like, it's not easy coming from a different country and starting something in Norway. I mean, like, I'm Norwegian, I know how it is. So I mean, like, it's a really, it just showcases like the opportunity is there if you're willing to put down a work, and you showcase like, what the value you're bringing, and why you the personality you stand for, because I think also the values that your Rintch stands for is very important into, you know, your journey and where you've been part of. And I think that's something that people should think about, you know, moving forward as a young sports student, professional, wherever field you want to study or be part of.
Absolutely. And the long term, because, you know, it can take time.
Yeah.
How do we evaluate that? You know, nobody knows.
Yeah.
But of course, by being consistent, and that's to your question about in this particular time where, you know, we have some challenges. Showcase what you do somehow.
Yeah.
That's the only way to sort of show the world that you still exist, because you can quickly disappear, especially now.
Yeah.
That will be my suggestion.
I think it's a perfect way to end this podcast with, you know, showcase your work, you know, utilize the time now to put yourself out there. And yeah, Rintch, I would like to thank you, you know, so much for the time. It's been a pleasure having you here, you've been sharing your insights with us, and it's a fascinating story. And I mean, like, we're gonna work closely, you know, during this year, and we're gonna make sure that, you know, also basketball comes back at its speed. At least we'll try to do our part for whatever we can.
But I really look forward. I saw what you do with your other partners, and I follow very thoroughly, and I really appreciate what you do for them. So I can expect definitely the same.
Thank you, Rintch.
So the expectation is high now.
I mean, like, that's totally fine. We're here to deliver. So for those of you, you know, that have been following us so long, you know, I hope you enjoyed the episode. You know, make sure to, you know, support the Rintch Basketball Academy page at Sporting Global. You know, see what it's up to. We'll be sharing content there. You know, it might be some cool opportunities coming up as well, so stay tuned for that. And yeah, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. So with that, Rintch, we're gonna finish up with some Norwegian this time, and that's Vi snakkes.
Vi snakkes.
Perfect. Ha det bra.